Winston Spencer Churchill. How hard to realize that his remarkable life has ended. At Blenheim Palace, a ground floor bedroom heard his first cries. In the closing years of Queen Victoria's reign, he came to manhood. In the gay days of Edward VII, the second of the 6 reigns spanned by Churchill's life, Winston was already in Parliament. To the horror, if not of the monarch, certainly of high society, he had crossed the floor of the House and was campaigning vigorously in and out of the Commons as a bright star of the Liberal government. When the next sovereign, George V, celebrated his silver jubilee, Winston was a Tory again, somewhat out of favour. Edward VIII came, saw and abdicated. His friend Churchill tried to defend him in the House. In 1940, Winston was Prime Minister at last, rallying the country when Britain had escaped defeat by the skin of her teeth. London could take it, so could the rest of the country, but it would be a long time before we could hit back. At that time, his speeches rang over the world. If the Commonwealth endured for 1,000 years, he said, men would say this was their finest hour. He crossed the Atlantic with Lord Beaverbrook, eager to make America a more active enemy of Hitler. That was the first meeting with President Roosevelt, the beginning of the alliance that doomed Nazi Germany. In Cairo, with, among others, Australian statesman R.G. Casey, he planned the campaign that threw the Nazis out of Africa. Later, meeting President Inonnu on Turkish soil, Winston tried in vain to bring Turkey in on our side. But the tide had now turned. The Allies had tasted victory. Winston flew to Tripoli to congratulate General Montgomery and the 8th Army Monty had led in the first major triumph on land achieved by the British Army. The man who had fought as a subaltern in the Middle East 40 years earlier was more than a little proud to be among the soldiers who had won victory in the desert. He told them that his directive to General Montgomery, brief and very much to the point, had been, sweep Rommel out of Africa. The 8th Army had done so. Winston came home more of a hero than ever. Though the war was still a long way from being over, even the Germans, or many of them, were beginning to fear that Hitler could not win. Together now were Britain, America and Russia, and at Tehran there was a conference. But first came the presentation to Stalin of the Sword of Stalingrad, a token expressing how warmly Britain admired Russia's victory there. Who then could have foreseen the Cold War that came when the World War ended? He was light-hearted in those days, and anyhow he never could resist a new hat. At the Russian embassy in Tehran, Winston, Roosevelt and Stalin planned the concluding stages of victory over Germany and Japan. We had come a long way since Dunkirk, when no allies stood with Britain. The day came at last when the Germany of Hitler stood in ruins. From the Nazis, Europe was saved. It was peace now. His youngest daughter Mary was a mother. Winston himself in the familiar role of grandfather. Peace it was, but how those Alamein reunions brought back tremendous memories. The man who survived the grim years could now joke about them in company with the old warrior who had been the architect of victory. After 6 years in the political wilderness, Winston was at the Conservative conference in fine fettle.
I don't often do that. I mean, when I'm making a speech.
He was still Prime Minister when he celebrated his 80th birthday. Congratulations pouring in from all over the world. In all ways, a big tribute to a big man, a man of Parliament, a House of Commons man. So in Westminster Hall, led by Clement Attlee, fellow members paid their tribute.
On behalf of both Houses of Parliament, Prime Minister, I ask you to accept this portrait.
He never liked that portrait, but how exactly it hit him off. The father of the house, David Grenfell, presented the book containing the signatures of the MPs of all three parties. Everyone that day felt that the book was the gift, above all, Winston would have chosen himself.
This is, to me, the most memorable public occasion of my life. No one has ever received a similar mark of honor before. There has not been anything like it in British history, and indeed I doubt whether any of the modern democracies abroad has shown such a degree of kindness and generosity to a party politician who has not yet retired and may at any time be involved in controversy. The portrait is a remarkable example of modern art.
Later on came a splendid tribute from America, which his son Randolph went to Washington to receive on his behalf, no less than honorary citizenship of the United States. There was an amusing touch when the special passport that was required was handed over.
President, I hand you a honorary citizen's passport for Sir Winston. This is the only document of its kind in existence, a unique document for a unique citizen.
Thank you very much.
Somehow, however immersed he was in public business, he always found time to paint. In that field, another honor came to him at the Royal Academy one-man show. His family went to see it. He was away himself, remarking the sense of humor he expressed, even on canvas. What a many-sided man was Winston Churchill, yet doing nothing by halves, as Monty and Alan Herbert no doubt reflected. At last, when the weight of years was too much, he retired, 55 years after he first entered the House of Commons. With his historian's mind, he reviewed the half-century of sweeping change, much of which he had fashioned himself. The Edwardian world was a dim memory. In its place, the welfare state and the atomic age. There was one more duty as Prime Minister, to go to the palace and tender his resignation to the young Queen. They were sitting late at the house, but Winston was not there. He was giving his last dinner party at number 10, his guests, the Queen and her husband. Elizabeth II was bidding official goodbye to the veteran First Minister of the Crown, whose father had kissed the hand of Victoria. It symbolized the continuity of constitutional monarchy and our democratic life. De Gaulle renewed his wartime friendship with Winston. The Frenchman was now President de Gaulle on a state visit to London. In the old days, they didn't always see eye to eye, but each had enormous respect for the other. Another general had become President of the United States. He arranged a reunion at the American ambassador's residence in London. And to them all, as they recalled the World War, the central figure was not one of the soldiers, but the happy warrior, Winston himself. So now let us praise famous men, saluting the memory of Sir Winston Churchill. he wrote his name upon the scroll of heroes, upon the history of the world.